Hey, my name's Stan Geip. I'm here with Becky Dolman for another episode of David vs. Goliath podcast. Today, we're going to talk about what, maybe some of the most, the saddest and sort of most significant claims that we handle. And those are your birth injury claims. Okay. And birth injury claims are just like they sound. Things that would happen to the baby during the delivery process that would result in injury, right? And, there's a number of different things that can happen, okay? But, there's certain injuries like cerebral palsy, okay? Erb's palsy, any kind of head damage or brain damage that could be related to a forceps or vacuum extractors, okay? Anything that indicates your baby may have had some asphyxia or problems breathing during the delivery. Those are all sort of like your red flags. If you see that stuff popping up, it may not be malpractice, okay? But you want to look deeper to see because, this is your baby, okay? And this is going to be a lifelong problem. And I'm going to defer to Becky on this a little bit, but, birth in and of itself is a very unique time and a unique process for everyone. It's exciting, it's emotional, it's dangerous. Okay. I've been there. Okay. I know Becky has been there. We've had different experiences, obviously, with it. But I can tell you, I don't, it's hard for me to think of a more emotional time in my life than when my son popped out. You're like, holy crap, it's the magic of life. There's so much going on. You're crying. People are crying. There's all sorts of emotions. Okay. And all of us are praying. You just pray happy and healthy. Happy and healthy, happy and healthy. And what if they don't come out healthy? Okay. And this happens sometime. And it can be sad and it can be, it can be a very, horrible experience to go through. And as a parent, no one wants to admit that their child is anything less than perfect. Okay. Your child is your perfect baby no matter what. So when you're sitting there, the first thing that happens, a doctor's going to hand you a baby, okay? You want it to be healthy. You hope it's a healthy baby, but sometimes it's not, okay? When the doctor hands you that baby, okay, if he's not healthy, the doctor's never going to come up to you and say, hey, I messed up, okay? The doctor's never going to come up to you and say, this is my fault. The doctor's never going to say, if I had done everything right, we could have delivered a normal baby, but unfortunately I didn't. Okay, the doctor's just going to tell you, hey, there's something wrong. There's something unusual about the baby. Okay? It's going to be up to you to figure out what caused it. Okay, doctor's not going to tell you. Okay, so these are things that as a person, as a mother, as a father who's just giving birth, I wouldn't expect you to know exactly what led to the injury. Okay, we wouldn't expect you to be an expert in the birthing process. And quite frankly, it's an extremely emotional time. So, and I kind of talked to Becky about this as a mother who is sitting there, nursing a newborn child. What would it take for you to reach out to an attorney and inquire to say, hey, what is it? Is something that's wrong with my baby possibly due to the doctor's malpractice? What sort of things is it you as a mother would see in a baby that you think would raise your suspicions?
Well, the first thing I would say is if you have the smallest inkling that what's going on with your child is a result of something that happened in delivery, my first recommendation would always be discuss your circumstances with an attorney who understands birth defects and knows what's going on. As Stan said, a lot's going on during the birthing process. You can see and pay attention and understand what's happening and might not fully be aware of a problem as it's occurring, right? And so when you're having your initial consultation with your attorney, he or she may hear things in your story that automatically raise a red flag to them, where they could say, okay, well, that probably shouldn't have happened, or that could have been done a different way, something that wouldn't necessarily tip off the new mother or father. So it's always important to make sure you get that initial invitation consultation, even if you think there's a slightest chance that something could go wrong. I mean, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot that could go wrong. Um, there could be a failure to provide appropriate prenatal care, which starts even before the birthing process. Failure to diagnose any kind of problem or infection that might be going on with the mother prior to birth.
A lot of times when you're looking in the delivery room, you may come out with a baby that's got some sort of problem or disability that doesn't appear to be related to the delivery process. Okay, well, that's where you start looking at the prenatal care. Okay, did the doctors perform a proper ultrasound? This is important. Okay, did they read the ultrasound properly? Was there something in the ultrasound that should have indicated to the doctor that they needed to start a different course of treatment earlier on? Okay, the other thing, was there a problem there? Failing to communicate a known risk to a patient is a big deal. Okay, if the doctor knows that something's a risk, they need to tell you. You as a patient make the informed decision of how you want to proceed forward. You as a patient are the one that, would have an option. Do you want the C-section? Do you not? Sometimes there are emergencies, and that's not always the case. But did the doctor properly explain the risks of what you were going through to you? Okay. Failure to perform specific tests. There are certain tests that have to be performed, okay? There's certain tests that should be performed. And the reason they're performed is because the doctors need to look at the results and rely on them. So did they perform all the necessary prenatal testing? Did they perform all the necessary pre-delivery testing? And did they correctly and accurately interpret the results that they got? Okay. Then the third thing, did they take the correct action based on those results? I can't tell you how many times we've gone through a medical record and seen this test came back bad, but nobody told anyone. Didn't get communicated. So even though we did the test, even though we got the result, that next proper course of action and treatment wasn't taken. And this results in, some of the most common things we see, and I think I mentioned is cerebral palsy, you got brachial palsy, you got some skull injuries, you get a lot of facial paralysis sometimes from these things, a lot of fractures. Okay, there's hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen going to the baby's brain. Okay, the doctor needs to be monitoring oxygen levels. The doctor needs to be monitoring the baby's oxygen. That's huge. Okay, the delivery process, the baby's deprived of oxygen for a period of time. If that goes too long, you can cause brain injuries. If the delivery process is difficult, sometimes the doctor may grab forceps or a vacuum extractor. Okay, you don't have to be a genius to see that there's so many ways that could cause injury if they're not properly used. And then, is there something that the doctor did that caused us to need the vacuum extractor or the forceps in the first place? Okay, you end up with brain damage. Sometimes it's irreversible. There's a ton of different injuries. I mean, all the way up to wrongful death. Sometimes the baby dies during delivery. So, proving these claims is difficult. You got to prove that they violated the duty of care. You need expert witnesses, and you need someone to calculate damages. Okay. All of this is super expensive. So Becky, talk a little, if you could, about what goes into selecting experts and documenting the way these claims, happen and the causation.
It's important to know in these kinds of injuries and cases that they're very expert intensive, meaning that we would need to hire expert doctors, all kinds of different experts to be able to evaluate and determine what happened during the birthing process. Because this is very expensive, you really need to pay attention to who you're hiring to handle these matters for you. There are some firms out there that just don't have the bandwidth to handle these types of claims. And you don't want to get into a situation where you're with a firm that's not going to be able to handle this to the best of their ability because you don't have the best advocate for you and your child at that point. Having a child with special needs is going to be an expensive endeavor for you as a parent. There's a whole new set of issues that you're going to have to deal with moving forward through life. And it's important that you hire a law firm that, one, has the experience with dealing with these types of issues, and two, that can afford to put forth the funds to hire the experts that are going to be needed to show that your claim is worthwhile and valid.
I mean, right. A lot of times we can end up with six figures in cost, before we even get out of the gate. And another thing that, kind of happens is as people, we live and learn from our human experiences. Okay. If you've experienced something, you know a little bit about it. If you've experienced a lot, you know a lot about it. Okay. So we've been through injuries, we've been through hurt, we've been through these things as humans getting up there. It's going to be rare that you made it to giving birth as an adult without having any injury throughout your life. Okay. We can go through and I could break my arm. And, I would recommend you get an attorney for that type of claim. But even as a naive person, you've got a broken arm. If it heals completely, you can kind of in your mind come to a number that might be fair for that. Yeah, you could come up with something that would fairly compensate you for what you've been through, both in the past and the future, due to that broken arm. If I'm to tell you as a parent, here, how much money is it going to cost to take care of the lifetime medical needs for your child with cerebral palsy? Do you have any idea?
No,
No.
and that's why it's so important to get the proper experts and the proper help in these matters.
And that's right there. The life care plan. Okay, that's it. This is where we hire an expert. And these experts are super expensive, super skilled in the specifics of talking about a lifetime of care. And there are a number of things that when you think about care, you don't always think about. For instance, I've had a claim with a paralyzed lady. Okay, and you think about the medical care when she's paralyzed, right? Okay, when you speak to these people, she goes, this lady's biggest fear, okay, when she's sitting there in her mind, okay, she's worried that her house is going to catch fire and her children are going to die trying to rescue her because she can't get out. Okay, and these are true fears. Like, you don't think about this stuff if you're not in that scenario. Well, as a life care planner, believe it or not, if you're a paralyzed person and you're in a bedroom, the standard is care is to put a door on that bedroom to get out in the case of an emergency. Okay, that's got to be built. It's got to be cut. It's got to be put in there. But these sort of expenses are things I would never have thought of until I saw the life care plan. You go, wait, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
There's a lot of accommodations that go into helping people with disabilities you may not think of. And this is why it's always important to get out there, get the experts involved. They know what it's going to be like in the future. They know what you're going to be dealing with, and they can put numbers on it. These claims are often claims that go into the millions of dollars because of the catastrophic nature of the injuries. Okay, you want a super qualified attorney. You don't want a fly by night. You don't want someone who doesn't know what they're doing. And I'm going to put it that frank, that quick. You want an attorney that is competent to handle your birth injury claim. You want an attorney that's going to get your child all the money they need to handle these injuries for the rest of their life. And inevitably, birth is dangerous. Okay, the birthing process is dangerous. No matter how safe you are, no matter if you do everything right, there are going to be occasional injuries. There's going to be occasional deaths. Mothers are going to bleed out. There's going to be stillborn babies. These things are unavoidable. It's going to take a skilled attorney in your corner to evaluate the medical records and make sure that what happened, if it wasn't unavoidable, is properly compensated for both you and your child. So remember, birth injuries aren't about you. They're about your child. They're about your child, taking care of this child and providing the medical needs, educational needs, physically supportive needs to not only get them into society, but help them live as normal a life as possible. Okay? I can tell you this. An insurance company may approach you and say, look, we've looked at it. A lifetime of nursing care is going to cost $3 million. Right? $3 million, lifetime of nursing home care. You got no way to dispute that. But what you really don't realize is, no, this wasn't your fault. You don't have to put your loved one in a nursing home. We deserve a lifetime of in-home care. Okay, no one needs to take my loved one away from me. This was not an accident. If you injured my loved one and they need lifetime care, you need to pay for that care to be at my house. You need to pay for the care so that I can spend time with my loved one. Not here's how much it costs to put them in a facility. So there's a number of different thoughts, things, and stuff like that that goes out there. But birth injuries are some of the most significant claims we run across. They're some of the most difficult claims for sort of laymen, not say that people getting treatment to figure out what happened, because it's it's a complicated process. Okay, watch for these types of milestones. Okay, if your baby's having difficulty with crawling or walking, okay, if they're having trouble turning their head when there's a loud noise, okay, if they're feeling uncoordinated, okay, if you start noticing intellectual problems. Okay, like they have problems holding on to cups or eating utensils. Okay, problems with delayed milestones. All of these things: muteness, deafness, blindness, tremors, shakiness, stiff muscles. Okay, any of those things, let's look at it. Let's find out what the cause is. Let's see if this is a naturally occurring thing or something that was due. I don't want to say due, something that would have been preventable had everything been handled appropriately during the prenatal or delivery process. So in a nutshell, I think that's kind of what we wanted to say about birth injuries. We've got a website at Dolman Law Group, which is www.dolmanlaw.com. Going to have a ton of information on this. If you want to log on, you can get this done and log on and see a lot of this stuff. Okay. If you want to contact us more directly, you can always reach out to us at our toll-free number, and I'll let Becky have that.
Sure, you can always reach us via phone at 833-552-7274. We're available 24/7, 24 hours a day to handle any questions you may have.
Yeah, we can visit you in the hospital. You don't have to wait till you get home. Okay. And you may sit here say, I'm 2 or 3 years after I've had the birth. Okay. And you're just starting to notice these things. Whenever it is you notice a problem, that is the time to reach out. Whenever it is you think there may be a problem, that's the time to reach out. Whenever it is you feel like a doctor may not be being honest with you, or your BS flag goes off when he's speaking to you about the cause or what's going on with your child, that's the time to reach out, because you can never be too proactive, you can never be too safe, and you can never do too much for your injured child. Thanks for listening on another edition of the David and Goliath podcast. If you're ever involved with a birth injury situation, we hope you choose us. We hope you use our resources. But no matter what, make sure you reach out to an attorney, because it's going to be in your best interest.